Welcome to the Sci-Fi and Sunshine Podcast. The story you're about to hear includes content that might be triggering to some. Parents, please use discretion. Hi, I'm Bria, a speculative fiction author and a running mom. Today's episode of the Sci-Fi and Sunshine Podcast, I'm recording again. I'm not live. It's gotten a little easier to do it this way, just based on what I'm still figuring out with going live. But I might get back to going live again soon. In the meantime, I had an idea for today. For today's episode, I decided I'm going to read one of my short stories, one of my but early on short story publication. It's a science fiction dystopian short story. It's a little on the longer side. I don't know how long this is going to take me to read it. I didn't figure this out. I actually, in one sense, I wanted to go live because I'm just grabbing this anthology that it's in. Haven't read it in years. So it's kind of an experiment for me too, of like seeing an old story that I haven't read in a while. And let me just get into it. So this is the anthology. It's called Welcome to the Future. It's backwards. Gosh, yeah, there's just no way around that. Okay. At least not right now that I figured out. So this anthology is out of print. And my story was published back in 2014. It's called In Line at the DMYV. And it's on the darker side, like this whole anthology. The premise is looking at what the future will hold, kind of in a darker lens. So even though I'm bringing the sunshine, it's daytime, there's sunshine. I meant to have this in the frame. Here's my little sunflower. Okay, look, there's some brightness and color. And then we're going to read a super dark sci-fi story. So get ready. I had this idea at the DMV. So that's like the most that I remember about writing this short story. I was at the DMV. If you've been to the DMV, it takes a long time. And so I got bored and was jotting down story ideas, and I ended up writing this idea of tying into like a futuristic type of DMV called the DMYV. So that's why the title is In Line at the DMYV. And I don't know how else to preface or to like, it's hard to know how I'm going to feel reading this story, if I'm going to be like, oh, cringe. Should have worked on that more. But the fact that it was published in this anthology, it was one of my, not very first, again, it was not, I had a paid publication before this one, but it was an early on paid publication in this anthology, so that was very exciting for me. So I'm going to read it. We'll see how long this goes, and if you get bored, you can always tap to like double time it. I don't know if you do that when you listen to stuff where you're like, I don't have all this time, but I'm kind of interested. You can always change the speed and make it double time. So, or like time and a half, whatever. I'm going to try to read, expressively and whatnot, but okay, here we go. And I'm going to figure out how to hold the book over here so I can, read it while kind of facing the camera. Okay. This is why this is all like newer podcast. Not everything is in the best shape, but at least I have a sunflower. Okay. Yeah. And it's one of those days like, okay. In Line at the DMYV by Bria Burton. Here we go. Caitlin queued behind a couple with a distinct rotten apple odor. The man wore a black leather vest with no shirt underneath. His hair tapped the white skull in the center of his back each time the line moved forward. Caitlin didn't like the skull. She turned from its black, gaping eyes that glared at her like a bad omen as she neared the guarded entrance of the Department of Mandatory Yearly Visits. The decision she weighed squeezed her ribs like a too-tight seatbelt, making it difficult to breathe. She had to decide whether or not to kill someone during her visit. Whatever she decided, she might not make it out alive. She needed a distraction, something to prevent her from hyperventilating. The air in line was always heavy, especially once she entered the building. She wasn't inside, not yet. There was time. Breathe. Beneath a cloud-filled sky, the outside line wrapped around the nondescript building, winding through roped-off segments that used to be parking spaces. That was before the government required citizens to update their license and identification forms every year in person. When the 100 Laws of Liberty came into effect, thousands of DMYVs were erected to accommodate the visits. As usual, the variety of people in line displayed a range of different fashion styles, but not much variety in age. The hip royals, originating at expensive private schools in 2045, stood out the most with their focus on genuine everywhere bling. Caitlin, a plain Jane, didn't like to stand out. It wasn't safe. The youngest in line would be 16. The oldest? Probably a few in their 40s. She thought she spotted one gray-haired person near the back. Upon entering the line, she'd taken a flyer from an officer. Mandatory reading, he'd said. Most of the people in line obeyed and read the 100 Laws of Liberty, probably not for the first time as they were taught from elementary school onward. There wasn't much else to do. She still wasn't ready to make a decision. The opening line read, "These 100 laws will govern the lives of American citizens without regard to the feeble and inadequate laws of the past. August 27th, 2020. That was before Caitlin was even born. She had never read any other laws, so she never knew what feeble and inadequate laws were being replaced. She wished there was a way to find out, but they were supposedly sealed in a vault somewhere as a symbol that they would never be repeated. She continued reading, but couldn't get past law number 6. When she tried to move on to number 7, her eyes would return to the former and read it again and again. No citizen of America is permitted to take the life of another citizen by any action or means of their own accord. The murder of another American citizen is punishable by a court of law and will not exceed the punishment of life imprisonment. The first exception is made when a citizen has requested that their life be taken in the form of a witnessed and signed written will, and the only executable means of this will is in a government hospital or Department of Mandatory Yearly Visits, DMYV. The second exception is made when a citizen has filled out Form 243351 at the DMYV. This form supplies every citizen of America with one anonymous, government-sanctioned opportunity to deprive one other American citizen of life. The governing bodies deem this exception necessary to the sustainability of the United States of America in lieu of overpopulation. The full list of government officials immune to Form 243351 can be found in the Library of Congress and in online catalogs accessible to the general public. Someone sneezed. Caitlin stiffened, suppressing the desire to scream. Another inch forward. The couple, an homage to the 1980s with crimped hair and matching acid-washed jeans, was next. Then Caitlin. She squeezed the newspaper in her left hand. Time was running out. How much longer did she have? 2, maybe 3 hours, depending on the length of the inside line? But it was like slow, torturous drips of water tapping against her skull, counting the seconds, making what was left both an eternity and a blink. The rolled newspaper reminded her of the decision she still had to make. As the couple moved, disappearing through the front door, Caitlin unfolded the paper and read the headline for the 20th time that morning. Local businesswoman, serious contender for congressional seat. A familiar face smiled and waved in the picture. Maxie Hastings. Caitlin's fears for her own life temporarily abated, shifting and morphing into a seething anger that made her nails dig holes into the paper. Maxie was the reason her best friend, Sandra, was dead. In high school, Maxie had been popular and took pleasure in tormenting Sandra. She threatened to use her kill on Sandra the minute she turned 16. It was an unoriginal threat. Kids said that to each other constantly. When I turn 16, I'm writing your name on my kill form. Oh yeah, I turned 16 before you, so I'm writing your name on my kill form. A surprising few, according to statistics, actually used their kill when they turned 16. 59% of all kill forms were filled out by 21-year-olds. Some social psychologists suggested that the correlation with the legal drinking age meant most kills were the product of irrational, beer-goggled reasoning. Further studies showed that the more likely correlation was the influential public universities and their government-employed professors. The most staggering statistic was the number of people over 25 who, like her, hadn't used their kill. Less than 5%, meaning 95% of people aged 25 and up who claimed they hadn't used it were lying. When Caitlin was 15, she and Sandra had sworn on blood that they would never use their one government-sanctioned kill. Sandra died not long after they made paper cuts in their hands and shook on it. Caitlin had kept her word since then. At 30, she was still in the 5th percentile, for now. The headline changed things, made the decision worth revisiting, however abominable she believed it to be. Tap, tap. In her head, the dripping water continued like a ticking bomb, seconds disappearing. It was like this every year, the wondering. Would she ever see the bright sunlight again, feel its warmth on her skin, or would she walk into that building and never come out? But for the first time, she was also asking another question. To kill or not to kill? Her indecision left a sour lemon taste in her mouth. Maybe she shouldn't allow that thought to enter her mind at all. Could the idea initiate decay in her brain? If she imagined dripping sounds were any indication, her brain's deterioration had already begun. The officer opened the door of the building and gestured for her to proceed. She obeyed, only to be gobsmacked by the couple's rotten apple odor again. Inside, the line continued to snake back and forth for 7 long rows. At the opposite wall, an officer stationed beside the closed door leading into the DMYV offices proper opened it to the next person, shutting it behind them and returning to attention. To his left hung a giant framed document, 100 Laws of Liberty. Each government building posted the laws in one way or another. The flyer in Caitlin's hand was a printed version of the same thing. The line didn't move while Caitlin reread law number 6. It was like a tick. She couldn't help but study the wording. When she glanced up, someone else finally went through the door. It was a strange moment of relief that immediately bounced back into panic. The slower the line, the more time she had. The more time she had, the more agony she was in. She didn't know if a faster or slower line was better, but she knew that it wouldn't change whatever awaited her. The idea, I lost my place for a second. That idea made her stomach tighten and knot up. She had been inside enough times to know that after proceeding through the door, an employee led citizens to one of the offices where they met with an agent in private. An officer was stationed outside each agent door, ready for summoning if necessary. In the last 14 years, a summoning had not been necessary for Caitlin. She'd avoided landing on anyone's kill form, but that didn't mean she'd avoided it this time. She lifted a hand to see it shaking. She gripped the newspaper and flyer. The weight never got easier. Now that she was inside, it was worse. The tap-tap was louder, more insistent. Her stomach churned each time the line moved. Today could be her last. She had entered the building, and she might never leave. Fear enveloped her pores, making her feel feverish and nauseated. This could be the year someone wrote her name on Form 243351, known commonly as the kill form. Yet it meant it could also be her last chance to write someone else's name on that form. She closed her eyes, willing her fear away, searching for hope, praying. But if it was her time, there was nothing she could do about it. Why should she expect to live when so many never even made it to 30? She had no one to go home to except her cat. Maybe death meant she could see her family again. This might be her last day on Earth, but she had lived a long life comparatively. Or was it one of the last days, plural? She wasn't positive about the killing process after someone was named. Did they do it right there in the office? All DMYVs had second story windows, but she had never been upstairs. Maybe there were rooms up there where the killings happened. Maybe. She wouldn't know unless someone named her on their kill form. She didn't want to find out. "Was it you?" A man's voice across the room broke the silence. It was always like that, silent. Everyone was in the same predicament. No one knew whether they were coming out alive. Even with the melting pot of people in line, they were still a herd shuffling quietly toward the unknown with their heads down. The place was more somber than a graveyard. It was difficult to see the man past 5 rows of craning necks. Tell me, was it you? Now my entire family is gone. Caitlin held her breath, suppressing tears. Her family was all gone, too. She didn't like to think about it. The man wore a business suit and was accusing someone, another man in a suit, of using his kill. Both of them looked old, maybe in their 40s. You may as well have killed them all. Admit it. An officer came from somewhere. His voice bellowed, "Come with me, sir, now." "I didn't kill your wife," the other man, the one being accused, responded. "My son died the minute he turned 16. I know you're responsible, even if you had somebody else do it. You've pretended to be my friend all this time. Am I next?" The officer escorted him out of the line. He didn't fight, but continued shouting. The guard at the door opened it, and the yelling man disappeared behind it. The last thing he said was, "You're going on my kill form." Caitlin wiped a tear off her cheek before it fell. She didn't have much time left, maybe an hour, but even so, live or die, she wanted this nightmare to be over. She knew of very few complete families. The long-lasting ones made the news. Some became celebrities with their own reality shows. Inevitably, someone would get killed, and they would fall apart from there. The anonymous nature of the kill form prevented anyone from finding out who named them. It could be a spouse, a family member, a friend, an enemy, a stranger, a lover. When people talked about the kill form, the default statement was, "I'll never use mine." But people did. Otherwise, so many wouldn't be gone after their trip to the DMYV. Caitlin had no idea who killed her mother, her brother, her sister, or her grandfather. Her grandmother died in a car crash when her mother was 8 before anyone else had a chance to kill her first. Her father left when she was 2. She had no idea if he was dead or alive. In her early 20s, just after her mother was killed, she seriously considered using her one kill on her father. She highly suspected him for her mother's death, and thought it might be the only kill she wouldn't regret. Except not knowing for sure raised the question, if he hadn't killed her mom, did he still deserve to die for leaving them? The question ate at her until she gave up on it, acknowledging that regret would destroy her as it had so many others. At the office, one of the other secretaries confided in Caitlin about her choice to write the name of their mutual boss on her kill form. Afterward, the woman started drinking and eventually became an alcoholic. It got so bad she would come to work smelling like rubbing alcohol. When she was fired, she stopped by Caitlin's desk. Mascara ran down her cheeks. She leaned in, the alcohol breath stinging Caitlin's nose. "The guilt isn't worth it. Don't ever use it," she cautioned. Even with her own conviction, Caitlin was still considering the decision. For Sandra's sake, she felt that she had to. Inching forward, Caitlin's trembling hands unfolded the paper again. Despite the low probability that Maxie would follow through on the threat and use her kill when she turned 16, Sandra had been tortured by the bullying. She shared secrets with Caitlin that she dared not tell anyone else. Sometimes Sandra had nightmares. Sometimes she pretended to be sick so her dad would allow her to stay home from school. She nicked bottles from his liquor cabinet to help her sleep without nightmares. Sometimes she wet the bed. At school, she hid whenever she saw Maxie. Once she accidentally ran into the boys' locker room, trying to avoid her not paying attention. A bunch of football players decided to mess with Sandra. That's what they told the principal later. Just mess with her for barging in on them while they were changing. One boy pushed her into a urinal and she split her lip. Another boy pushed her into the bathroom stall. The one who went inside with her was close friends with Maxie and knew how often she threatened Sandra. He whispered to her that she would die soon, so she should make sure she got laid before that time came. After he raped her, he convinced others to do the same. The boy had reasoned that, although Sandra might die on her first visit to the DMYV, she could still use her kill form beforehand and name him. He didn't want to be singled out. Apparently, Maxie had never been worried about that. Caitlin visited Sandra at the hospital and then at home, often reading to her from their favorite books. Sandra didn't want to talk much, and Caitlin didn't know what to say beyond repeatedly apologizing for what Sandra had been through. Caitlin read aloud, hoping it was a helpful distraction. She felt helpless to do anything except try to be a good friend when everything else in the world seemed to be against Sandra. When Sandra was well enough to return to school, Maxie started stuffing condoms into her locker. Sandra would open it, and a pile of them would cascade out onto the floor, to the amusement of anyone nearby. The school counselor was useless. The boys were given slaps on the wrist because one of their fathers was a judge. No one could prove that Maxie was the one putting the condoms in the locker. Even though she was back at school, Sandra wanted Caitlin to finish reading Anne of Green Gables aloud to her. She hadn't asked for help in any way. It was the least Caitlin could do. They went to their favorite spot in the park by the pond, and Caitlin read. Sandra interrupted her during the scene when Anne asked a friend to look at the Queen's examination results for her, afraid she had failed. "Katie," Sandra whispered, holding a half-eaten apple in her hand. She stopped reading. Sandra was the only person who ever called her Katie. "Yeah?" Sandra set the apple down and stared into Caitlin's eyes. "We have to do what we promised. We can never fill out a kill form. No matter what, not ever. Do you swear?" Caitlin gulped, thinking about the torture Sandra had been through. Everyone else had gotten away with what they had done. Wouldn't it be fair if they each used their kills on one of them? Especially Maxie. But she didn't say that to Sandra because she was right. It was wrong, even if the government allowed it. And they should keep their promise. "Yes, I swear." "I swear too." Sandra held out the hand where the paper cut was no longer visible, but Caitlin knew it had been there. They touched their palms together. Then Caitlin continued reading. Of course, Anne passed the exams and won the Avery Scholarship. On the day after Maxie's 16th birthday, she paraded the halls with a sign that said, "I used my kill. Goodbye, Sandra. No one will miss you." Excuse me. Okay. The school frowned upon it, and she was called to the principal's office, but what could they do? It wasn't illegal. She was stating the fact of her right to one government-sanctioned kill. The law protected the identity of those who filled out their kill forms, but nothing prevented citizens from admitting that they had used it. That meant in 3 months, Sandra would walk into the DMYV on her 16th birthday and never come out. A week later, she killed herself with a bottle of pills, swallowed with a pint of whiskey. At school, Maxie cornered Caitlin in the hallway, slamming her against the lockers with her books. Caitlin couldn't hide her red, watery eyes. "I did you a favor. She almost ruined you. Now you can join the cheerleading squad, and I still have my kill to use." Before Caitlin had the chance to tell Maxie to shove her entire cheerleading squad where the sun didn't shine, the last part of what she said sank in, stealing her breath. "What do you mean you still have your kill? You used it on Sandra. You don't get any more. I only made that slut believe I had used it, and she took care of the rest." She smacked her gum, smiling with the kind of hatred that made her look insane. Caitlin's heart pounded, and her eyes welled up with fresh tears. She wanted to hit her, punch the gum right out of her mouth. "I got what I wanted, and I still get to use my kill someday. But I'm not stupid. I'll be saving it for when I really need it." She jabbed her finger into Caitlin's chest. Caitlin balled her fist, but didn't lift it. Maxie's threat was clear, hardly veiled. "See you at practice if you have the guts to show." She walked away. Caitlin bit her tongue until she tasted blood. Of course she wouldn't join the squad now, despite having tried out freshman year and not making it. Maxie probably knew that. She just wanted a reason to share the information about not using her kill. People like her somehow managed to thrive in this society. People like Caitlin kept their heads down and let others cut in line at the grocery store. The picture of Maxie in the paper reminded Caitlin of all the times she almost broke her promise to Sandra. She was always shocked that someone else hadn't done it already. She and Sandra couldn't be the only ones Maxie had abused. Maybe people who thought about it already used their kill on someone else. But Caitlin had been true to her promise, even if Maxie didn't deserve it. Their inner debate arose again this time because of the political angle. Senators earned lifetime immunity from the kill form, like so many others who worked for the government. It made sense, she guessed, that the president was immune because who would want to run otherwise? There were always masses of people who openly admitted to wanting to kill any given president. If Maxie became a senator, no one could ever name her after that. If they did, they would be informed that she was not eligible, but that they could pick someone else, meaning this could be Caitlin's last chance to name the one person she truly believed deserved to be killed. The line moved, and she entered the lane closest to the door. About 20 people were ahead of her. She didn't have much time left to make her decision. Tap, tap. In truth, she didn't know what was right or wrong anymore. Things seemed so backwards. Murder was permitted. People died so young. Tap, tap. Caitlin was at the front of the line, and she still hadn't made her decision. "License, please." She handed it to the officer. He stood at the door examining her picture ID. Soon the door opened and a girl peeked her head out. "Thanks, Clyde." She took the license and disappeared back behind the closed door. Several minutes later, the officer opened the door. "You may enter," he said. She wondered if he thought about the fact that some of the people he admitted were never coming out, or if he gave up thinking about it long ago to make the job bearable. The same employee who took her license met her inside. She escorted her to one of the open doors in a long, wide hallway punctured by officers at every door, whether it was opened or closed. "Here is the agent who will be helping you today," the employee chirped with a smile. Her boss must require cheerfulness in this dreary place. The nameplate read Becky Truman. A stout, curly-haired woman sat behind the desk. "How do you do, Caitlin Harris?" Standard government greeting. "Fine, thank you." But Caitlin felt anything but fine as her shaky hand slipped the flyer and the newspaper into the trash bin beside Becky's desk. "No, I'm not a descendant of the president," Becky said dryly. "Have a seat." She must have gotten that inquiry too many times. It hadn't crossed Caitlin's mind to ask as she lowered into the wooden chair across from Becky's desk. She didn't have all 52 presidents memorized. After tapping the computer silently for several minutes, Becky looked up. "First things first, Miss Harris. Would you like me to provide you with Form 243351? Caitlin knew this was the opening question. Every year she had not wavered. She had responded, "No, thank you," and the agent had moved on. This time she hesitated. The decision should have been made by now. She shouldn't have let herself get all the way into this room without finalizing what she would do. Tap, tap. "It's not customary for someone your age to need clarification on the use of Form 243351, but would you like me to explain it?" Becky was matter-of-fact. If she were offering to explain a tax form, Caitlin believed her expression and tone wouldn't have been any different. It should anger her that this woman, this agent of the government, was so casually offering to help Caitlin kill someone. It should, but it never had. Not since Caitlin first entered the DMYV at age 16. These people were just doing their jobs. They weren't immune to the form. Politeness wasn't simply a job requirement. They were trying to survive like everyone else. Tap, tap. May I please look at the form? Just look?" Caitlin's stutter was probably not the first Becky had heard. "Of course." She slid the form across the desk. "No obligation to fill it out. If you do, you will never be able to fill it out again, but I will need the form returned, whether it's blank or not." Caitlin nodded. "Okay." She glanced at the bin beside Becky's desk. The newspaper was propping up on other refuse. Maxie's picture faced Caitlin, smiling, waving. There was something comforting about seeing Maxie in the trash. It was so long ago, yet the hurt Maxie inflicted felt fresh on days like today. Sandra wasn't here because of her. So many other people had been killed. Caitlin's whole family was gone, but that had nothing to do with Maxie. Tap, tap. "Would you like a moment alone to think about it? It's a big decision, and I'm permitted to leave you in the room with an officer for up to 5 minutes. Caitlin dropped her gaze to her lap. She flipped over her trembling right hand, palm up. The paper cut was long gone. She and Sandra hadn't cut deep enough to make a scar. They weren't sadistic. That was the point. They wanted to be anything but. Tap, 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 tap. Caitlin didn't make eye contact with the form. She looked up and gazed back at Becky. She was surprised to find such compassion in the agent's eyes. She looked about 30, too. She had been in this seat as many times as Caitlin had. She knew what it was like. "I've made my decision. No, thank you." "Not a problem. Moving on." Becky retrieved the form and clicked away at the computer again. Caitlin exhaled. Her quivering seemed to rise and evaporate with her breath. Sandra would have been proud. She felt such an overwhelming peace that the tears welling in her eyes couldn't be helped. She wiped them away surreptitiously. Becky didn't seem to notice. The next several forms she slid across the desk were all too familiar. Caitlin filled them out quickly and returned them. The earthquake within that had passed threatened to shake her again, and as she neared the end of her visit. She had been true to herself and was grateful for Sandra's strength that helped her get through it, but that didn't mean she was clear and free. She could still die here. Okay, you're up to date and your citizenship is in good standing. Any questions before you leave? Becky slid her license back across the desk. Caitlin took it, briefly shuddering, feeling the breath of life enter her lungs. She could leave. She got to live another year. No, she said, smiling, laughing. Thank you so much. No questions. Then you have a great day. The agent reached under her desk. Then she returned to her screen, tapping away. Caitlin rose, light as air. She glanced down at the paper in the bin and stopped. Wait, I'm sorry, she turned back. I do have a question, if it's not too late to ask. The same employee who had escorted her to the room opened the door. Looks like you're ready to go. Becky held up her hand. Sorry, Lee, I buzzed you prematurely. Give us a moment. Sure, I'll be back. She grinned as she shut the door. Have a seat. Ask away. Becky gestured to the chair and Caitlin obeyed. It's just I'm not sure if you can answer the question. Honey, you can ask whatever you'd like. She tilted her head, and if I'm permitted to answer you, I will. It's about the the form 243351. Becky folded her hands on top of the desk. It's just curiosity about how it works. When someone's name is written on the form and then they come to the DMYV, what happens when they finish with an agent like yourself? Caitlin had never bothered asking this question before because she believed no one would tell her anything. She didn't expect an answer now. Becky nodded. You're the first person this year to ask me that question. You'd think more people would, but they don't. I think by the time they hear an agent say, ask me any questions and then you'll be free to go, all they hear is you're free to go. They could care less about anything they were wondering about before and hightail it out of here. I'd be happy to answer your question. To think, Caitlin almost left without asking. She crossed her legs, getting comfortable. She would live another year, and she was actually enjoying Becky's company. The last deep, meaningful conversation she'd had with anyone was with Sandra. First off, if someone has been named on a kill form, they won't be sent to my office, or any of the offices on this floor. Where do they go? They are escorted by an employee like Lee to the elevators. Upstairs, like Caitlin thought. Okay. Let me find my place. I've never seen elevators. She tried to picture the long hallway having elevators somewhere. At the end of this hall, you turn left, and they're behind another guarded door. You can't see it until you turn the corner. That's where an officer takes charge of the citizen for the duration of their visit. She had said visit as if she didn't mean the rest of their life, probably by habit. If the person figures it out and is a screamer, that's usually when it starts. Screaming? Caitlin had never heard screaming. The door they passed through is soundproof. Most people cry. They knew it was a possibility, and they resign themselves the moment they come in. They already said their goodbyes to family. Caitlin didn't have anyone to say goodbye to except her cat. Every year she left her apartment key with her neighbor in case she didn't come back. She didn't want Roscoe ending up at a shelter. The neighbor always promised to take good care of him. Truthfully, most people don't realize that the elevators mean anything. It's not a secret per se because I'm permitted to tell anyone who asks, but it's just not common knowledge because most people don't ask, and those who find out from experience, Becky paused, well, they don't get to tell anyone. She looked down, frowning. She seemed genuinely disturbed by what she was telling Caitlin. Did she feel the same way about law number 6 as Caitlin did? That it was wrong? That it shouldn't be something the government allowed? Once on the second floor, the person is escorted by the officer into a room with 3 more officers. The agent is always behind a glass window. The majority of people figure it out at this point if they didn't already, because they've come to the DMYV enough times to know they've never had that experience. Those people tend to keep asking the agent if they're going to die. The agent isn't permitted to answer questions until they finish all the forms. That's one of the reasons the line can get so long. The forms have to get done first, and some people think that by refusing to fill them out, they will somehow stop what's going to happen. Caitlin felt that sick, hollow pit return to her stomach. It was so wrong, all of it, and to think she almost wrote down a name. Despite what a horrible person Maxie was, Caitlin would have spent the rest of her life regretting that decision. When all the forms are done, including the kill form, Becky used air quotes, and questions are answered, the officer escorts the citizen through a door at the back of the room. It opens into a long hallway. It's just above this one. She waved her hand back and forth in a stiff line. It leads to all of the rooms, guarded of course, where a doctor waits. The person is strapped down by one or more officers first. Then they are allowed to send any last words to the people they are leaving behind. There is a tech in the room who makes the recording. He leaves after that. Caitlin shifted in her chair. The images Becky painted were vivid, making her think she really knew what the experience would be like, to be strapped down, about to die. It was terrifying. The person has one last chance to ask any questions. The universal question is, who named me on the kill form? But they don't get to know, said Caitlin, feeling sorry for anyone who had ever or would ever go through this terrible experience. Actually, the doctor is permitted to answer. What? Caitlin leaned forward, her hands catching the desk. But it's against the law. There is an amendment that went into effect almost immediately after the 100 Laws of Liberty were enacted. It's not on the original document, so that's why most people don't know about it. The original is what all the government buildings frame and hang. Even our flyers haven't been updated. The person about to die could find out who named them on a kill form? But they'd take that information with them to the grave. Would Caitlin want to know? Yes, she believed she would. The doctor tells them, and usually I lost my place. They don't have any other questions. They are given Exogentax, the lethal tablet to swallow. It's painless, truly humane. They go unconscious and they don't wake up, except Becky squeezed her lips shut. Was that all you wanted to know about? The abrupt way Becky stopped herself piqued Caitlin's interest. You were about to say something else. I was about to speak my personal opinion, and that isn't permitted while I'm in this building. Caitlin sat back in the chair, curious, but not willing to press Becky for more. Now she knew what happened to someone who was named on a kill form. She never wanted to go through that experience. She didn't want to die in a DMYV. Whatever she'd been doing, she had to keep doing it. Be polite to people. Keep your head down. Don't stand out. Don't make waves. But Becky intrigued her with what she said and what she could be about to say. Caitlin didn't know any DMYV employees personally. It would be interesting to hear her perspective. The more she spoke, the more Caitlin believed that she and Becky had at least a few things in common. Any other questions, Katie? The sound of that nickname stunned Caitlin silent for a moment. Becky smiled in a way that reminded her of Sandra. Caitlin swallowed back the lump forming in her throat. Since Sandra, she hadn't made any other close friends. Maybe it was time to try. There's an Irish pub off 44th Street where I sometimes have a drink after work. Would you want to meet me there tonight? Caitlin fidgeted. Maybe you could tell me what you were about to say. McPatty's? Love that place. I can meet you there at 8. Caitlin grinned, pleased. Okay. She rose, feeling bold. You know I'm telling the truth when I say I've never used my kill. I do know that's true. It's not something that I'm permitted to share, so you don't have to worry about that. No, it's just that I'm wondering about you. Have you ever used yours? Becky sighed. If I say no, you have no reason in the world to believe me, especially considering the stats. But the answer is honestly no. She'd have to be in the 5th percentile like Caitlin to be telling the truth. But something made her trust this government agent. Becky might turn out to be a kindred spirit like Sandra. I believe you. Thank you. You're welcome. I'll see you later, said Becky, at the pub. We'll talk, okay? Caitlin turned back before walking out the door. I'll be there, I promise. She left the room. Striding through the hall, she felt hopeful. She looked forward to another year. The exit sign glowed above a door 20 paces away. An officer stood ready to open it for her. Right this way, Miss Hastings. No waiting in line for you. Caitlin froze as if her shoes had gotten stuck to the carpet. Her body jerked slightly forward, unable to move past the shock flooding in. She turned, her gaze creeping over her left shoulder. Lee led a woman away from where Caitlin stood. They walked down the hall toward a soundproof door and elevators waiting around the corner. There are like 7 officers right here with agents sitting inside. Why are we going this way? Maxie Hastings. Exactly like her picture in the paper. Business suit and skirt, hair smoothed and twisted into a claw clip. As she followed Lee, her eyes glared at all the agents they were passing. "Follow me, please," said Lee cheerfully. Maxie faced forward, her back to Caitlin, mirroring Lee. They took a left around the corner, and both disappeared. She might have imagined it, but as Caitlin exited the building, she thought she heard the distant sounds of screaming. The end. So I mentioned this was a dark story. I genuinely did not remember how dark I wrote that story. So I think I need like a warning because this is not a story for children. There's not a lot of kids who watch my stuff anyway, but yeah, I'm gonna put a little warning at the beginning. I did not remember. Yeah, you just, if you're here, you heard the whole thing. Yeah. It's kind of strange because this was 11 years ago that I wrote that. Well, probably 12 years ago, and it got published 11 years ago. And it did just start with sitting in the DMV and, yeah, man. Okay. I'm kind of taking it all in. It's obviously a bit long. That's probably the one thought I have right now is I could have, like, my place I'm at in writing now, there are things I would cut and shorten some of it. Yeah. There was a rape scene and I did not remember writing that. I don't really know what to say about that. I mean, so much of when you get into the dark side of humanity, and that's what this story is exploring. There must have been a point in the last 10 years, probably when my son was born in 2017. There probably was a point where I shied away from some of the darker stuff and kind of forgot that I do have a few stories like this that are dystopian, that are pretty dark. So if you're still here, thanks for listening to that whole thing, and would love to know your thoughts. If you want to share, it doesn't matter. Yeah, this is again a story I hadn't read in years, and it just once I had that one published, I just didn't really go back to revisit it ever again till now. So, okay, the trigger warning should be at the beginning, so hopefully that'll warn off any parents who think their kids should listen to my stories, because I do have kid stories too. So that's why I'm like, I definitely need that warning. So, okay. So I brought the sunshine and I brought the darkness with my story. So, thanks for listening, and I'm going to send you to the outro. Bye. That's all for now. As you venture through this sci-fi world we all find ourselves living in, may you be the sunshine to the people around you today. Adios.